Divine Rise. Blessed be to your day. May be everything you require to gain clarity into what you desire. Understand that healing is destructive. Understand that you are deserving, but you're not entitled. And a level of honesty in facing yourself is going to make everything you once thought, or highlight everything that you once thought as the opposition. Join me on TikTok. I dropped a video today. Moves versus steps. Moves and steps. It's a nice little seven-parter. Because I made a post when I got up and I was like, if every time you come up for air from the proverbial pool, the womb of life, when you're coming into this space, this is your womb. You are being birthed into you're being birthed into a new space. If every time that you come into this space, understanding this, I'm going to break down an example. If every time that you come into this space with yourself, there is a irritation, there's always something there to meet you at the top. It's time to go deeper. Think about this thought. Hold it in your mind. The breath of life. When you speak, you breathe life. You speak life into existence. But even if you didn't do it, we've seen the movies. Think about holding your breath. Visualize you when you were little, when you held your breath or you stood your ground in a sense to get whatever it was. Think about a kid holding their breath and trying to hold their breath until they blew in the face and, oh my God, until I get this. The child's not mad at they didn't get what they wanted. The child is mad because they couldn't hold their breath that long. The child is not mad that they didn't get the candy or whatever it was. They're mad because they couldn't hold their breath that long. But due to the space in not seeing themselves, not being able to see themselves or have comprehension of themselves, they can't see that. This is the suffocation for existence. This is how I operated, most of us operated for most of our time. It was basically, that's why you always, after a while, in this suffocation, the move being the suffocation, you need something to expand it. You need something to expand it. You do all of the work for the car just to put the windows down during the summertime, just so you can enjoy the breeze. But then you forget the steps to how simple it is to walk outside and enjoy the breeze. You'll put up teen hours into a task just to think about the task or the result of that task and what it was supposed to bring. But you never embrace the steps that it takes to get to that task. All we look at is, I know that this brings this, and this. So we look at one side. But it's that old ever what's in the negative that allows that projection to exist. Everything that's in that negative space, that negative, that dark feminine, that shadow inside of that space is why that exists. These are the steps. That is the move. Because of those steps, you make that move. You will only be able to make moves based on those steps. So as long as I'm not assessing these steps, I'll always look for the same moves. Breath of life. I'll always breathe based on the steps that I've learned. The rationalization, the standard based on rationalization, in the opposition of rationalizing, the structure based off of the entitlement or the ideology of the entitlements, and then the stability or the pressure that's based on me, that standard, that stability, that structure that I'm so akin to. I will continuously make this move over and over and over again, not once looking down at my feet. This is how I think. This is how I used to think about my moves, and why my moves were so. I wanted my moves to be so prevalent, or to make my move look so pretty, or make the move look so. The move looks so great. The anticipation, the infatuation, but not looking at those steps. Not looking at those steps. That assessment. Stepping into that assessment. Absorbing. Understanding that everything else, everything inside of that space at that time is teaching me exactly what it is. But if I'm only looking at it based on, as I talked about yesterday, the result, the title itself, I deny myself the steps. I'll deny myself the steps every single time. I'll overthink the steps. I'll overthink the steps. Now, therefore, I'm overthinking the position. Since I'm overthinking the position, now I'm over compensating based on the move. And just because I don't stumble doesn't mean I'm not falling. Just because I wasn't stumbling didn't mean I wasn't falling. Just because you stumble doesn't mean I'm not stumbling. I'm not falling. My stomach's all right. I'm good. I can go another couple days. I can go another couple rounds. I can go. You stop listening. Inbox me. We can talk about it. Sitting inside of that space with myself, with that process, staying inside of this process of the mindset, not realizing that my mind is only structured based on the memories, patterns, the imprints, everything but I'm not listening to myself. I'm not listening to my design. Whenever you break down your human design, after you look at your natal chart, you go into your human design. Your human design tells you what you are, your not self is. It tells you what your active motors are. Like, for example, my active motor is sacral, the sacral chakra. So it's based on the feel, to move based on the feel, to speak based on the feel, to navigate based on the feel. That's throat. So when I look at my sacral, my throat is defined, my sacral is defined, and I have one more motor. I can't remember it at this moment in time. But these two main motors. Now, all my other motors, my spleen, what your spleen is for, your spleen is connected to your lymphatic system. That's survival. That's your survival. That energy comes in through that space. So if you don't have a defined splenic center, you're going to take in everything that comes into that space is filtered based on survival. That's how you learn how to survive. All of these aspects within inside of your design. But if I'm not taking the assessment, I don't understand those aspects I'm thinking about through my mindset. The lack mentality. The more that I remember always being asked by the teacher, or whether it was a teacher, think about how we're taught this. You're taught by the teacher, you're taught by your parents, you're taught by your parental figures, you're taught by your grandmother, you're always taught to express what is needed. That's that's the processing of externalizing your need. So you never comprehend the in-between of what I communicate or what I speak it creates the space of what I say that I need. So it's like this is when you say you mind your words. So if I know that when I speak, I'm telling myself what I need, that means if I keep saying this in this sense with myself, I have to, do I have true comprehension? Am I comprehending what I'm saying? And the only way I can comprehend what I'm saying is going to a level of assessing myself. And the only way when I start assessing myself, that's me sitting down and looking at, as I call it, the track record. Looking at your track record. If we're thinking about the ships and you captain or you on whatever ship whatever ship you're trying to maintain, you got to look at your manifest of every other ship that was on that log, everything that's on the manifest of those ships that are on those logs. See, a lot of times, based on the external aspect of the need, we'll sit there with ourselves and we only have to keep one, because something's already still in play. The mindset is still in play. What's on your mind is still in play. What's imprinted, what gets recorded is always in play inside of your subconscious. And it continues to play itself out. That's playing on constant repeat. Between your subconscious and your conscious, they keep repeating the same thing. And they're just running on automatic. Cycling. So basically, since you're looking outside for the need, and you're cycling these thoughts through your mind, and you're not taking the moment to assess or bring yourself into that center, every time that you go out, you only look things based on that or match that frequency. You look for the things to stimulate what you believe to be what it is. That's how you start creating your space. That's how you create your space. That's how you move inside of this is how we dictate our spaces. But then you got used to it. Remember yesterday I talked about the aspects of really sitting there and assessing how I was assessing that the manipulative qualities that were present, or the levels of me not being 100% with myself, and then noticing that every time that I was in that space with myself, that's when I would seek whatever. That's when I'm stuck in this seeking. You give it a reason, you put logic to it, but that reasoning and that logic, that's not the definition. One thing that I had to understand, that wasn't the definition, because the definition for me inside of my design is not frustrated. My design, within inside of my design, is to respond. Also inside of my design is to impact. It's to inform. So if I'm not acting in a state of informing, if I'm not informing myself, I'm damn now to inform. If I'm not informing myself, that means defining it to a simple point with myself. Then I cannot, I'm going to seek it from others. So now we think about what you're seeking. The why behind it. That why is inside of your definition. This is what I mean by this shit challenges the entitlement and the expectations. This challenges the entitlement and the expectations. One scale is of entitlements and the other scale is of expectations. But you're not realizing that you're projecting through those points to yourself. You are that, this when we think about that aspects of that Trinity complex, the Trinity. The unknown becoming your subconscious. And everything, the only thing based in your unknown are the things that you project into that space. The only things that are of the unknown or of your darkness are the things that you project into that space. The things that you have long let away. The things that you have long believed to be gone. The things that you long to believe that you don't have to really look at. That's what I mean about your track record. The biggest thing about my track record that I remember from this example that is based on being accepted was based on my finding out who the other part of my family, the unknown aspect of my family. So gathering that information, and now I'm acting out based on this because I'm acting out of anger. I'm already angry. So everything that I'm doing naturally inside of the space where I'm at, where I don't want to be at, because I still feel they should have said something or they should have did something or it should have went a certain way. Why couldn't they have been honest with me? I'm now acting these things out and projecting them into my spaces. So now I'm acting this out to get this. So when I get this, now I don't think. Now I'm in the aspects of the feeling. So if I keep doing this if you keep doing that over and over and over again from the first point, whether it was how you learn value, how you learn the flow, how you learn the first aspects of relationship, whatever it may be. And these are the surface level aspects. What's up? What's up? You're going to keep repeating that over and over again. You're literally going to copy and paste. You're literally going to copy and paste. You're going to copy and paste from this space over here. This worked, and this worked, and this worked. You're going to take those what worked and bring it into this space. And then you're going to keep doing this. But you're not realizing that every time that you copy and paste, the only way that it fits inside that, the only way that it fits and it looked like it works is because those imprints are still present. So you still need what created those first impressions to exist. I still needed the impression of what my mother was to exist in my spaces. That's when you've reached that point of that note. That's when you've reached that point. That's where assessment happens. Because on either end of it, you looking at, because this, that's glad that you said that. When you think about it from this, I remember from the point, I've talked about this before. My mother, I told the story about my mother. I'm an accident, took the money from me, all of these type of aspects. I needed those imprints to exist. I needed those imprints to exist. I needed that. So I needed my mother. So now inside of this other space, trying to become the best son, trying to become the good person, or maintain this good mentality with myself. Now, naturally, my mother needs to stay the same way for me not have to change myself. So I can stay upset. Because in that same instance of my mother would ask me, hey, I need a couple dollars. Okay. I give them to her at that point in time. Pay the offering to the altar, and then go going about my business. But then when I didn't have it, this is the key. When I didn't have it, or when I didn't want to deal with it, now I'm getting the emotion. This is the law of even exchange. You get exactly what you give, whether it's in the physical or whether it's in the emotional aspect or in the mental aspect. You always get that space. You always gonna get it. That's the only way you can react to it and keep doing what you're doing, because you're getting exactly what you said you desired. Your original desire, your original thought is still in play. That original idea is still in play. It's still in play. You just need another variation in the space to keep reminding you of it. So now inside of your space, you'll keep getting reminded of it. But think about your senses. Think about your senses. If I know what it looks like, I don't have to think about the smell. I don't have to think about what I hear. I don't have to think about what I hear, what I smell, everything else, because I'm only going based on the sight. This is what I see. But the other steps are in the other senses. This is whenever I'm talking about the aspects you going into manifestations. When you're manifesting, you're setting your intentions. Those are your steps. I want this. This deck of cards. This card. I want these cards. There's steps for me getting to these cards. There were steps before I got to these cards. The reason I couldn't get them, it wasn't because of what I was reacting to. Damn it, I ain't got the money. That wasn't it. That wasn't it. Damn, I ain't got no way to get to them. That wasn't it. In truth, it was the steps to get to these. The understanding. The last part of the video, we got into the aspects of the faking until you make it. I'm gonna fake it until I make it. I'm gonna act this certain way to get this, and this. Shit don't exist anymore. The fake it till you make it is a topic from like the 80s and in the 60s and the 70s. Fake it till you make it. The veil is gone. The veil is gone. What did you think the veil was? The veil that you're seeing, the veil that you waiting to fall out in front of you, that is your transparency. The veil has went away. The shift that you're waiting for to take you to where you need to get to, that is your steps. That's those steps. So I had to understand, like, there's steps. But since I'm not used to looking at my track record, I'm not That means my track record are the steps. My track record was the steps. My reactions were in those steps. That was my standard. That was my structure. That was my stability. My standard was based on the acceptance of others. So the perceptions of others to define my worth. Because at a young age, that's what I was taught. That's what my mother saying something that was emotionally deadening of saying you're an accident. That made me have this complex of to prove that I'm not an accident. So now everything that I do is to prove that I'm not an accident. So every time that I have an accident, I make a mistake. That's when I'm becoming emotionally present. That's when I got to sit down. But since I'm not used to sitting down because that memory is still playing. That memory's still playing. All I'm going to do is externalize. This is where we get the commentary where we give ourselves. This is where you get that commentary with yourself when you're like, okay, cool. Once this happens, and this happens, and that happens, then I'll do this. Not realizing that this right here is the lead to all of these. Because without that original thought that you keep having with yourself, I need to sit down. I need to sit down in that space I need to sit down. That's what this is showing me. Shit really, really shaky. That means I need to sit down. The shit's getting really shaky. I need to do this assessment. Shit is getting really shaky because I keep making the same moves. That's the pattern. You keep making the same moves only because it's based on of that same pattern. As long as that pattern is still in play and you have examples, because you created the examples of that pattern, exactly when we think about the time to time, because that's what you're looking for. We get used to looking for that breath of, breathe breath into my creation for me. Because I don't have the strength to go forward. It's like, think about this. Really thinking of, really thinking about those processes. Really, when you really start sitting with your processes. When we sit with your processes, we're not used to listening to ourselves. We're used to listening to reply. We're not used to listening to the internal. We're used to listening to our mind. Our mind, hey, you got to do this, you got to do this. And you set a timer. You set the timer based on what's going on inside of your mind. So through this over aspect of conditioning, I stopped listening to how I felt. But since my natural motor is based on feeling, and I'm not listening to how I feel internally, I got to depend on somebody else's feeling to give me my reaction so I can react to that. But in reality, I'm only projecting. See, there's layers to that projection. When you start, because in truth with it, it's like, think about it like this. If you go to your job and you don't talk to anybody at your job, it means you got your headphones in. You ain't listening to nobody at work. You simply looking at the orders on your screen, or you looking at the prompt that you got to type up on the computer, or whatever your job may be. You'll go through the whole entire day on automatic. You'll do everything that needed to be done. But then something has to come up to keep you inside of that train of thought. In those moments where you're hungry, in those moments where you're expressing your needs, that's when you're becoming emotionally present. In moments when people are becoming emotionally, are expressing their needs, expressing their feelings, expressing these thoughts. Expressing those aspects. You're only going to be able to comprehend it based on your level of depth within inside of yourself. So therefore, you're only able to speak based on that same level of depth. Here's the key when speaking that. Can you simplify it? Because there's a big difference between intellectualizing it and saying that you read this and you read that and you read this piece of paper and you read this, which are good points to actually say, I read this and then I built on it, then I understood it as this, rather than saying, well, I was reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or I was watching this over here, and understanding that that's what's connected. The only reason that you connected to it was based on your emotions. So now you keep doing that same move because it's attached to an emotion that you have not yet defined. That hope, that dream without no steps. I can never reach the dream until I make the steps. I can never reach a goal until I take the steps. I can't without the steps. We can get so used because in your mind, you already have a preset destination up here of what you're trying to fix. None of this can be fixed. It can be assessed. It can be removed. It can be assessed and removed. It can be adjusted. It can be owned. Because that's the old foundation. Everything up here in your subconscious is your old foundation. It's not based on feeling. It's not based on the feeling in the present. It's based on the feelings that you felt. It's not based on seeing anything in the present. It's based on what you saw. It's not based on what you're smelling right now in the present. It's based on the smells of what you remember. And that's where this is when you stuck in that aspect of the past. So the moment that something does come up that matches that, that's when you can say, yep, I was right. But at the same time, in that same duality of the space, what if it don't come up? Now you got to create it. Now you got to make the invitation. Because you're not creating anything until you've owned everything that's in that space. Now you got to create it. Now you got to create that paradigm inside of your space to create that rift or that split. So now you go from everybody's done me dirty, nobody respects me, nobody listens, to now you're not doing the listening. You become the enemy of yourself. And depending on the spaces that you're in the level of emotional intelligence inside of that space. If everybody around you suffocating, they're all suffocating for their own reason. This is when you start looking at your space and being like, oh shit. Yep. If you're I remember my emotions, great. When my emotions were based on survival, that means the process or what I was receiving, the result was to make me happy. That is a very slippery slope. That I need something in my space to make me happy. Because the moment that it starts making me happy, I'm putting all of my energy into that to making me happy. So now all of my energy is comprised into that space. So now everything that's of my subconscious is now what I'm defending this from. Not realizing that simply being in that space, not being vulnerable, not being open, I'm defending that shit from myself. So now I got to look at all of my patterns based on protecting things from myself. And in reality, on the other end of that spectrum, I'm protecting this from myself because I don't understand myself. I shouldn't have to protect myself from myself. I had to understand that I shouldn't be sitting in a space with myself and saying something of the narrative of, I don't like when I get angry how I feel. When I'm saying these lines to myself, this is my inner child telling me, hey, let's sit the fuck down and talk about this. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this past the point of trying to make reason of it, rationalize it, using our old logic based on our survival. Let's go deeper. Let's take these steps. And this is where we get into the aspects of forgiving yourself. Because until I forgave myself, and the video right now is on my YouTube channel talking about my first apology. My first apology was garbage to myself because I was expecting something. I had an expectation. I had that entitlement on the table, that expectation. Sitting there like, instead of me saying that exactly, now I'm defining my why don't I like this because of this? What does that remind me of? And the craziest part about it, this is when you start looking at your track record and you really start going back and you're like, oh shit. Because that was my childhood. My childhood was based on being on the run. Or my childhood was based on being on the run. My childhood was encased in this fear of being exposed. Because I'm on the run. I'm on the run, so we can't be exposed. I'm always looking at the aspects of my mother peeping out of the blinds, or my pops and his complexes, and that's what I'm feeding from. I'm still feeding from it. So now I have my own complexes that are based on that old foundation. So every time that I'm trying to build something new, that new foundation comes in, I'm not realizing that I got to destroy the old foundation. That's why you see things happen. Now, oh my God, my life's starting to get really, 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 really. That's part of the process. You can't build without destruction. What you gonna do? Add on to it? This is when we think about, this is the thought process. I didn't have a plan. I just wanted to add on to what I was already doing to feel that pressure. I was still living under the pressure of trying to be accepted. I was still living under the pressure of that my old value system. I was still living under that pressure. So under that pressure, I'm confusing that pressure with my potential. So under that pressure, I'm confusing that with my purpose. So under that, I'm confusing that with my works. So under that, I'm confusing that with my standard, my stability, my structure. So everything's based in the aspects of survival. I'm used to surviving. So my survival, I'm used to this certain level of complacency with myself. So if I'm not surviving, then I'm not happy. This is how your mind, this is how your subconscious reads it. If I'm not in a state of pressure, that's when you start assessing that flow. Whenever you've assessed and you're like, that pressure is no longer present, now you have to define because you can't define pressure while you're in pressure. I can't define, if I'm a lobster in boiling water, if I'm in boiling water, I can't define the boiling water while I'm inside of it. It's only once I'm outside of that pressure that I can define it. That's the key. It's like, now I'm in that flow. So now I got to define my pressures. my pressure points. That makes me angry. I'm saying this makes me angry, but what's my definition to this anger? What is my definition, my why to that anger? Not everybody else's why, not everybody else's expectation, because that's when you still trying to live in the acceptance. Everybody else is doing this, but you don't understand. You don't know what their pressure system is. All you're looking at is that result, because all we're used to looking to is the result. So if I see that result, and this is how we can get offhanded, not really thinking of, this is when you become present with your emotions. If you see somebody doing something, let's say you see one of your homies get a new car, they get the new car, whatever, and you feel pressured, you feel that pressure. You're celebrating with them, but you're not really, you're in the back of your mind, you're like, man, they ain't got no license. They ain't got no license. I know they ain't got no money. I know they ain't got this, and this. I know they ain't got this, and this. So how were they able to get it and I wasn't? You just gave yourself the answer. You just gave yourself your own answer. They were ready. When it came to the aspects of the license, getting a license, they were willing to compromise steps. They were ready to compromise their steps to bypass that. They're going to have to deal with that. This is when we look at the assessment to yourself. I got my license. Okay. But you don't have insurance. It's one thing to have the title. But how did you get that title? There were steps behind you getting that title. There were steps behind you getting inside of that position. Those steps must be continued in order for you to stay inside of that position. So now you got to think about the titles that you've gained, the identity that you've gained. And then you start wondering why now inside of a space, you wondering why shit ain't popping off the way it used to pop off. Man, we used to sell dope back in the 80s. We used to sell weed back in the 80s. And now you still trying to sell weed. Meanwhile, every rapper that you know, every rapper, and there's motherfuckers that ain't even rappers, that have their own strain of weed, their own strain of, and you mad because now you want to go look for the weed that they selling, it's unnatural weed because it was made inside of a lab because of blah, blah, and you get stuck in that thought process with yourself. Instead of realizing like, wait, I need me seeing this and me being triggered by this, maybe there's some steps to that I need to do. Maybe that, not even if I want that result, but just being inside of this space and it's showing me something and it's triggering me, regardless, it's teaching me. Maybe I need to look up the information about getting my own strain. And then that's when that self-worth come in. That's where that self-value come in. Because now you're going to start thinking about yourself like, ain't no one going to buy no weed from me. Don't nobody know me. You only stuck into your space. Ain't no one going to buy a strain of weed from me. Don't nobody know me. I can't put my face on that. So now automatically, what do you look for? You look for something to attach to. You're looking for something to attach to give your identity new light. You need something inside of your space. This is the need for something, or whenever you feel this in transit need to do something, it's coming from lack. It's coming from lack. Whenever you feel this incessive need to do something, it's coming from lack. Whenever you feel this incessive need that you can't say no to something, it's coming from a space of lack. Whenever you have that incessive need to say, I don't want to go do this, but then once I get there, I started doing it, that's the lack. So now that you're inside of that space, you got to find something to keep you inside of that space and keep doing that. This is why You think about this. This is why you think about, okay, cool. I remember working, like, I'm going to use restaurant life because that's what I came from, restaurant life. I remember restaurant life, the whole logo, the whole thing behind restaurant life was work hard, play harder. That was the restaurant life. Stay in a constant state of stimulation. That's what you're looking for. You're in need for this constant stream of stimulation. Because the only reason I needed a constant stream of stimulation externally because I didn't know how to breathe. I didn't know how to breathe. The only reason that you need this constant stimulation or something to keep you under that pressure is because you don't know how to breathe without that pressure on your chest, without that pressure on your heart. Exactly that addiction. You need that pressure. You need somebody to apply pressure to you. So then whenever you get upset, mad, you can use that same line. I'm just applying pressure. No, you're not. You're acting passive aggressive. You're acting in a state of you're acting in a state of passive aggression. Because if you really sat there and sat with yourself, 90% of the things that if you really sit there and sit with yourself, after you say what you say, you start understanding that I don't understand this past a certain point. I've just been used to using this as it was. The used car lot mentality. As is. I'm just used to accepting things as they are. Because you're still seeking acceptance. This is where we think about judgment. This is where we think about your pattern. These are the things that we assess inside of this is the top layers of assessing your shadow. And really sitting there with yourself. Because you got to get to that point to where the pressure starts to rise and you pushing through the pressure. You've done it unconsciously, externally all the time. But when it comes in time to invest it into yourself, you start seeing that you really don't do it. You needed an external conduit to give you that charge. You needed something to give you that boost. Because you're not used to boosting yourself up. This is your self-esteem. This is your self-worth. This is your value. You know the price for everything, but you don't understand your own internal values. This is when we're talking about the aspects of you suffocating. You'll suffocate for existence. That's why when this is when I tell people when they first start meditating, and I'm like, all right, cool, we got to take these 3 deep breaths. We got to take these 5 or 6 deep breaths. And we got to hold it for 10 seconds apiece. And now you start feeling anxiety. You start feeling that stream of emotions because that's what's been active on those spaces. You've been holding your breath exactly in anger. You've been holding your breath in anger. You've been suffocating in your own anger. You've been suffocating in your own frustrations. You've been suffocating in your own darkness. This is when you're seeking the escape. You seek the addiction. You allow that complex. Blessings, blessings. Because that's what you've been used to. So the moment that something comes into your space, that new quality, that new shiny toy comes into your space and is of a different energy that you have not, is of a different energy, but it's of a different composition. It comes into your space as a different composition, whether it be the divine masculine or the divine feminine concept. When you think about the divine masculine, there's imbalance of the divine feminine. Think about the divine feminine, it's imbalance of the divine masculine. That's when you start getting triggered, like you start realizing that the seat that you've been in, if you feel like now put it like this. If you feel a need to compete, you're sitting in the divine masculine seat. You're sitting in the masculine seat. You're sitting in your masculine wounds. Somebody from the masculine presence has wounded you and you have not accepted it yet. If you feel the need to express through emotion, through anger, through only you hold it in and you only express it burst on through anger, that means something inside of you based on the feminine aspect has wounded you and you have not yet accepted it. You have not yet forgiven yourself for allowing it. You have not yet assessed and said with yourself of like, I need to apologize to myself for not knowing what I know now. And what I know now, I'm going to apply. And I'm going to go through this process of application. This is not a job. This is life. This is my life. I have to stop existing. Because as long as I'm existing based on the lack of something in my life, as long as I'm existing based on the lack of something I do not have in my life, I will resist the process. This is what I was talking about, where you are not willing, you will create the responsibility for a false sense of progress. To tell yourself like, yeah, see, I'm doing this, this, and this now. Therefore, I'm doing good. Doing good has nothing to do with being better. You got the pastor, you got the deacon of the deacon board doing real good now. Doing real good right now. But you still angry because he wasn't Deacon Sims before. He was Uncle Leroy down the street, giving all the little girls candy. You were one of them little girls. You were one of them little boys. And that's what you see them as. So since they're not owning up to it, they're avoiding it. In the same sense of you avoiding it, you still need that to be present inside of your space. So now that's how you define your protection of your family, the protection of your kids. That's how you define your protection. Not realizing you're protecting through the same emotional guideline. As long as they exist, you feel you need protection from that. See how you focus your energy into that space? So now you always need to be the protector for everyone else in order to avoid sitting with yourself. This is that step in that process. Even something as simple, it was cold as hell yesterday, I had a sweater on. Now today it's feeling mad warm outside. This is the aspects of me being vulnerable, the exposure. Everything that you've seen inside of that space. The way that you learned how to protect yourself. The way that you learned how to survive. That's what you're assessing. Those are what created your standard. Those are what created that stability, that structure. That's what creates all of these emotions can now be filtered through this neutral point. Until you become singular or present inside of that point, everything will continue to flow. Exactly, hypervigilance. Everything's going to continue to flow through that point and keep projecting into your space because you keep telling yourself that you need it. Denying it is saying that you don't need it. Denying that aspect is saying that you need it in your life. You need something to keep you angry. That's why you keep saying that you're angry. Because you're not really angry. You're saddened. You're upset. You're under that pressure. You feel you should have been somewhere by now. But in order to get to where you're trying to get to, it takes steps. The thought process in that shedding helps you understand your position and where you at. Sitting there stuck, you scared and afraid. That without that, who are you? Without that pressure. Now you stepping into this flow. Now you seeing shit differently. But this is dirt because that pressure is still present. You must define that pressure. You got to define that shit. You got to comprehend it. You can communicate and talk about it all day. When I was 8, this happened to me. And when I was 9, this happened to me. But when you coming to me, when we're going through the sessions, we're going to define, I'm guiding you into the defining of it. It's time to sit inside of that darkness. It can be kicking your ass. But you need that ass whooping. You've been avoiding the fight the entire time. You've been avoiding conflict the entire time. Because conflict, your fear of, the only thing that you saw in conflict was your mom go upside your dad's head. Or your dad go upside your mom's head. Or you saw your uncle fighting somebody. So that's what you thought conflict was. Conflict is a natural aspect of growth. Conflict is a natural aspect of growth. You need that. If you're inside of spaces where the complacency is always talking about conflict and there's no self-accountability, I talked about this last week. The solution without a self-accountability is just a prolonging of a problem. Time to step out that survival complex. I desire you to be the motherfucking best. As always, I desire you to be the motherfucking best. The only way to become the best is understand that this healing shit is destructive. Healing is destructive. You are deserving, but you are not entitled. And the level of work is going to make everything is going to make those entitlements and those expectations help you see that those are your only oppositions. Your entitlement and your expectations are your only oppositions. They're your only enemies. They're your only enemies. But you still try to keep them as your friends. Nope. It's time to hello and goodbye. I'm Papa Lucifer Samdi, occult therapist, psychoanalyst, shaman, guide, spiritual life coach, healer. Don't matter what the moniker is. I'm what you come to when you ready to kill some shit. If you ready to kill some shit, holla at me. Cause that's all I'm gonna guide you with. Let's make this death the most beautiful death that you ever embrace. Consultations, readings, all of the services that I do not put up on the list. Hit me up in the inbox. Hit me up on the inbox. And then start the dialogue. Today is your beginning. Today is your beginning. What you about to do with it? I love you. We love us. Ashe.